taking at least one online class, and 14% are enrolled in fully online programs. Those are the students we're going to be talking about primarily today, but you think about how many college students are out there, 21 million, and 3 million of those are enrolled in fully online classes and programs. Some of you may be as old as I and recall when John Kennedy was president, and he made the commitment that we're going to put a man on the moon, and the Apollo space program was launched. I think if a president of the United States 15 years ago would have said, we're going to develop an alternative method for people to earn a college education. We're going to open up doors to higher ed, break down the barriers of distance and time, and provide an alternative system. Many people would have thought that was audacious or even thought it was impossible. And I don't think we pause to give enough credit to all of the higher ed leaders across the United States, like yourself, that are on this webinar today, that helped make this possible, that we've really created an alternative method or a path for people in the United States to earn a college degree. So they no longer have to go to a college campus to do that. And the theme that's going to run through many of our comments today is that there is an alternative system there. Many students are choosing to go that route instead of going to a campus, and it's working very well for them. And it's quite an accomplishment for our society and for the higher ed sector of that society that we've built and developed and launched and are running this massive opportunity and operation that permits people to get a college education. So I wanted to emphasize that point, and Carol, feel free to comment.
Well, I just wanted to make one point on the slide, everybody. The blue mark, the data really point to 45% who take at least one online course, and the chart says 31. So it really, and that's what Dave meant is I think we just got that 45% rate last week. So the chart has not been changed. That's how current the data are. But so the 31 is really 45%, as it says on the text to the right of the circle graph. So really almost half of every college student in this higher education system in the United States have taken at least one online class. And we think that's phenomenal. The jump has been rapid in the last several years. We went from 31 to 45, which is just an indication of how so many of our young people and older students are engaged in online education. Just wanted to point out that difference in the figure.
Sure. Let's go on to the next slide, Wendy. And I want to make the point that this is the second year in a row that Aslanian Market Research and the Learning House has partnered to develop this online survey of college students. Our plan is to do another one next year, and I'm guessing by next year we may have crossed that halfway point where over 50% of the students have taken an online class. But the summary here is that the growth rate of these online enrollments is slowing, but it's still very, very rapid, 3 to 4 times the rate of classroom enrollment. In fact, last year and again this year, it looks like the average or the college population will actually shrink in the United States. There'll be fewer students going to college while the online continues to grow and expand. So you'll see that percentage increasing further. The next couple slides, move ahead, Wendy. I want to emphasize kind of a little bit of history of how we got here in terms of students taking online programs. I like to think of the decade of 2000 to 2010 as the great online student market rush, kind of like the land rushes in earlier days. There was this wide open field where there was an opportunity to deliver online programs, and some institutions rushed into that space and filled it. Some estimates were that back in 2000, there were 60 million adults in the United States that wanted and needed a college degree, but were time or place bound, so they couldn't attend a traditional college. So with the advent of fully online programs and degrees about 15 years ago, there was this huge pent-up demand. People wanted this, they needed it, and here was the opportunity for them to get it. So there was this rush of students to fill the seats or to fill the classroom places that were available for online programs. And many institutions at that time were for-profit that kind of led this land rush or this rush for college students and responded to meet that need. Institutions were doubling every couple of years in size. There were thousands of students that were taking advantage of this opportunity. Primarily for-profits, but there are also some significant public and private institutions that were also growing rapidly during that time frame. As most of you know, however, about 2010, that growth slowed and stopped and is even reversed. Many of the for-profit institutions that grew so rapidly in that time period have now stalled and are even shrinking and losing enrollment. Part of that's due to the regulatory changes that were made about that time. Part of it is also, though I think a more significant reason, is that most of those 60 million people were contacted by an enrollment counselor from one of these institutions and given the opportunity to come. So that pent-up demand was kind of satisfied in many respects. But a third really significant factor is that as this time progressed, many nonprofit institutions, both public and private, saw the opportunity and began to develop programs. So one at a time, here and there, little by little, they moved into this space. And so the second slide here kind of represents the decade that we're in now, where you don't see a major university like the University of Phoenix that's growing thousands and thousands of students. But you see lots and lots of smaller institutions or institutions with smaller programs that are entering the online space. So there aren't as many big dominant players as there were 10 years ago, but many institutions now are developing and offering fully online programs and degrees. So the space or the market has broken into smaller chunks. When you think about 100 to 200 miles from your campus, that's the territory where most of your online students are going to come from, because students no longer have just a few choices like to go to one of these for-profit institutions, but they have many choices that are local in their area from an institution that they know pretty well or have heard of. So the opportunity now is to develop programs, I believe, within your region that meet this need. There's still a tremendous need out there. There's tremendous growth in this area. And the opportunity is to build the programs, but we're going to see not as many national, major, across the country kinds of institutions as we are local, regional institutions that serve this need. Carol, you want to comment on that before we move to the next slide?
No, I just think that it's quite obvious that the distribution is scattered and it's reaching all elements of various territories across the United States. It's that once we thought rural people would participate in online education because they couldn't get what they wanted nearby, but the first institution, NYU, that offered an online certificate program back then in the early 90s, 90% of the participants came from one of the 5 boroughs. So, distance doesn't matter anymore. Nearer or farther, you can attract these populations to your site.
Sure. Wendy, you want to move to the next slide, please? And I'm going to turn it over to Carol at this point to tell you a little bit about the sample that we used, the demographics on this study, and how we organized the study.
Good. Thank you, Dave. Aslanian Market Research works with an agency that it has partnered with for more than 15 years. And we have a national panel of representatives across the country. I think it comes up to about 3 or 4 million people. And they are participants of census representatives. They represent the various domains within the census profile. And we invite them to participate depending on the type of research we're doing. And in this case, it would be researching that 3 to 4 million representative people for their qualifications to enter this national sample, as we did, by the way, in 2012. There's a 2012 report. We're now dwelling here on the 2013 report. the sample had to be 18 years of age and older. Footnote, that's really interesting because I was just reviewing some aggregate data for adult students in general, where we tend to use 25 and older as an adult, but you know, online education does not equal adult students anymore. And you'll see that from some of the data that come about later in these slides. So at 18 years of age and older, they had to have had a high school degree or its equivalent. And the big key determinant of whether we would spend our time receiving data from them was whether they had enrolled, were currently enrolled, or had really firm plans to enroll in a fully online undergraduate or graduate degree, certificate, or licensure program. So this is our 20-year definition of demand. We don't talk to individuals who say, oh, I'd love to go into an online program someday if I could with the right money and the right resources. We don't survey interest or desire. We only survey recent behavior, and by that we mean in the last couple of years. So we talk to people who have actually enrolled in, paid for, and are currently enrolled in or has just recently finished or plan to enroll in a fully online program. So there again, it's not that 45% we saw earlier, it's the 14% of all college students who have recently enrolled in an online program. Those are the people we want to hear from. Those are the people we want to describe a price profile of because they actually bought the product. Moving on, I'm going to give a little bit on demographics before handing it back to Dave. And no news to you in the audience. I saw the many institutions who are participating. No news to you. The online market is dominated by females, as is the adult market in general. But you know, this gets less surprising every year. If I'm not mistaken, I think in all of higher education today, we're about 55-45 female to male. So 55, 62, you might say, well, it's much more representative of the total population than it was probably 10 years ago. So it's a 2/3 adult market, slightly less female at the graduate market, but slightly more female at the undergraduate market. So these are, this is good data for you to use as you think of your publicity campaigns, the way you roll out materials to recruit adults and so forth. It is a dominant market among female participants, as has always been adult education. The age, now this is one of the most powerful slides I think we're going to present to you today. Look at the first bar. Almost 1 out of 4 fully online students is someone under 25. Now, you cannot say that for the adult market in general, but when it comes to online, and I think we can all think of the reasons why, the younger generation is gravitating to this format of instruction more and more. And the reason is, you know, as many of you can guess, cost. The younger market is different than it was 20, 30 years ago. They're more first generation, more minority, more working, more married. And in a sense, the younger are acting like the older. They want convenience and flexibility, and online education gives that to you. I think if you looked at the median age here, it's somewhere in the low 30s, but you know, that's kind of misleading. I said the other day to another audience, you really should look at the segments and market by segments. So look at the people over 40. That's about 1/3 of the market. The people in their 30s is another 1/3 of the market, and in their 20s, another 1/3 of the market. So it's just not one approach to attracting this population. I think you have to think of 3 different segments when it comes to age. And what is the popular theme and attractive power of your marketing and advertising to get students in these 3 different segments? Okay, household income. The median is about $55,000. That's that really fits the national median, by the way. Nationally, among households in the United States, the median income is in the low 50s. So the adults who go back to higher education for online education, income-wise, are like the typical household in terms of income. Employment status. What I want to show you is that, you could say almost half are not employed. So they have time to take more load, so to speak. They don't necessarily have to be part-time learners. I want to say only 56% are working full-time. So what do you have to offer this population that is employed part-time, probably looking for credentials and certificates or licensing opportunities so that they can go full-time? Those who aren't employed, who might want to be employed, and looking to your online education. So this has a lot to do with the way you market to these people and the way you set up your schedules. I think those who are part-time or not employed, or even retired to some extent, can take more load, can participate more fully in your online education. So this is not only a full-time market. And I think a lot of our for-profit sector friends have assumed that everybody going back to online education wanted full-time study, or that they could better finance their study if they were full-time with federal funds. But only appealing to the full-time market really negates your ability to appeal to the other half of the population who isn't employed full-time and can take both part-time and full-time loads. So this is not a full-time study market only, is what I'm trying to say. Highest level of education, when they initially considered enrolling, well, of course they had to have a high school diploma, but 70% of the undergraduates brought credit with them. And too many of you are not readily appealing to this population in terms of what they bring to bear. And when they have credits, let me tell you, they want you to recognize them, they want you to accept them, and they want credit for them, because that means less cost and less time. So you might wonder about that lower population there, the last two lines, the 12% who have bachelor's degrees or some graduate courses coming back for an undergraduate program. That's not unusual. We find that in our general adult market. They may have studied philosophy or government and now coming back for a degree in a more career-related topic. So we often see highly credentialed people coming back for undergraduate programs. But the message here is they have credits. They want you to look at them. They want you to give value to them to make their cost in the online program less and the time as well. At the graduate market, it's pretty much the same. If you look at, masters and above, 30% have a master's or above. And I think a lot of the people who come back at that point are really our educators who want more and more to run up that career ladder program. And there's something to bear in mind there when you're attracting them. It's not that they only are looking for that master's degree because they have a bachelor's, but they may want to go beyond the graduate courses they have. So they bring back credentials, and that's a loud and clear message. I think we go on. Do I take this one, Dave?
I'll jump in here, Carol. Thank you. I want to reiterate one point that Carol made, and that's about the population of online students that's 24 years of age or younger. The way I view this population is becoming more and more like traditional college-age populations. They don't have very much income. They have no credits that they're bringing with them. They're younger. They're not employed. They look and kind of act in many ways a lot like traditional college students. They've just elected to not go to a campus, but to go to college online. And so it'll be interesting to watch that trend towards younger students if it continues. You still have all those working adults out there that want and need an education, but increasingly traditional college-age students are going this route. So we asked a couple questions in this year's survey, which are very interesting, and that's kind of the value that you receive for your online program. The data that you're seeing here are only those students that had finished a program and completed it. So it's a more select group of people, obviously. These are the ones that were very successful in enrolling and finishing an online program. But when we talk to that subset of the overall sample, these students are very happy with the results. 31% said they were completely satisfied with the financial investment. 72% said it was completely worth their time to enroll in this program and earn this particular credential, certificate, or degree. So those are strong numbers that kind of validate that this system works, that you can go to college online, and that it is a good way for you to get credit and invest in your funds, so to speak. The next slide shows the results of these people when they go out into the job market then. Just about half of them, 44%, improved their employment status in some way. They got their first job, they moved from part-time to full-time, they found a job in a different industry, or they moved from being unemployed. And this was within 12 months of graduation. So they had to have graduated within 12 months to be included in our sample. So fairly soon after they complete their program, they see an uptick in their employment status. And the next slide kind of reinforces the same message. A number of them got a pay increase, and significant number, 36% overall, but 47% of the grad students got a promotion within 12 months of finishing their online program. Add to this the notion that a number of these students probably weren't looking for a different job or an increase and so forth. They might have been going back to school to earn that credential, to stay right where they were, to improve their skills in their current job. And again, this is within 12 months. So if we stretch this out to 2 or 3 years, I think you'll see bigger numbers showing up that would indicate that this was working for these folks, that it paid off in a sense in a better job situation for them to go back to school online. So impressive numbers that indicate, yeah, this is worthwhile. And again, if you're building and offering online programs, these are great numbers that you can include in your marketing materials, your message to these potential students that it worked. And here's some examples, or here's the data on how it could pay off for you as it has for other people. I'll flip it back to Carol now for this next set of info.
So we're all interested in what are these people buying, what are they enrolling in, and what is their intended credential. If you look at those bottom two pieces of the circle, the associate degree program and the degree, the bachelor's degree program, you'd say, well, undergraduate education is about half of the market. Associates combined with bachelor's is about half of the market. This might show that those associate programs offered by community colleges, for example, are a very good entry point for those who want to go on to the bachelor's degree program, and therefore those connections between 2-year and 4-year institutions for the online market is as strong as it is for the campus-based market. On the other hand, we've got at the graduate level about 36%, about a third of the market, and primarily dominated by the master's degree. And that's probably due to a lot. It has a lot to do with the fact that maybe we're not offering as much doctoral programs online right now, and so that market is small, is significantly minor. But the master's market alone is larger than the bachelor's market. So this is a good guide to how to plan your entry or expansion in the market in terms of degree level. On the other hand, I do want to point out that certificate program area, 13%, is a little bit lower than I think, Dave, we found last year. I think certificates are about 16%, but it's in the 2 years, Dave and I agree, we don't want to cause any alarm for pattern analysis yet. We need another year or two to do patterns. And I still believe the certificate market is a growing market, and the fact that many of you are not in it yet probably deters from people from enrolling because they can't get what they want. I think it's a good way to entice people to enter the program. In fact, Dave, I'm not sure if the later slides show this, but we did learn that at the undergraduate level, individuals online will take an online certificate and develop 1 or 2 certificates and then go on for the degree. So that attractive power of a certificate program in bringing people into undergraduate education has strong merits, whereas at the graduate level, they tended to do their certificate study after their master's or doctoral degree. Interesting to note.
Carol, we have a question. Does the certificate program in this chart include both undergraduate and graduate certificates? Is that 13% total?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. The answer is yes. Okay. It's very hard sometimes to ask people to differentiate the certificate level. But when we talked to undergraduates who had done it in a later set of questions, they were able to say whether it was before or after. Okay, moving on. So here's the big slide on what did they study, and we differentiate undergraduate from graduate. And so it's business, then it's business, then it's business. As we all buy homes according to location, location, location. When it comes to undergraduate study, it's business. And most of you have probably entered the field that way. And somebody said, well, if everybody's in business, why would I want to get going in business? And I'd say, if you're a drugstore in one corner and you're saying everybody's selling toothpaste, should I sell toothpaste? The answer is yes, okay? Because it is, you know, they're coming into a drugstore to buy toothpaste, so they're coming to your institution. They're looking for business. Followed by the social sciences, which are made up, and I look into all those categories from our 1,500 respondents. The social studies, psychology, criminal justice and law were the two dominant ones, then followed by STEM topics, which we are very excited about, coming up to 16%. We need many, many more graduates with STEM backgrounds. We know that for the economy and for future job growth. And then the health professions, a little less, although health professions, as I was just looking at aggregate data for the adult learner in general, health is like number 2 or 3. But when it comes to online, we haven't quite converted our health-related professional topics sufficiently enough to make that a larger proportion. And then on to humanities and liberal arts, and then look at education. We are very impressed with the fact that education is as low as it is, because in years past, I mean, education was much higher. But we know what's happening to the shrinkage of jobs and the changing of regulations from one state to the next, and you'll certainly see this in the next slide when we look at graduate fields of study. Next slide. And look at education now, which is 12%. Well, when we have done our market analyses for more than 300 colleges over the past, 10, 15 years, education or business was number 1 or 2 at the graduate level when it came to mostly ground programs. And now look at it at 12% when it's online. It's not only due to the fact we're now putting education online, it's that the market for education at the graduate level is in turmoil right now, given state regulations, and I know you all know what I'm talking about. So when you look at graduate study, it's even more business and more business and more business. But this time, followed by STEM. Look at STEM number 2. And well, that's a great sign, because we need these types of graduates. And then followed by the social sciences and then education. So this is a map of where your curriculum should be balanced, how it should be balanced on the online market. Unless you can say, in my part of the world, in this region where I want to do online education, because I'm not touching the nation right now, I'm touching New England or the Southeast or the Northwest, and I know that in the Northwest it's really going to be much more STEM. Then you change this proportion. But this is a guide, if you knew nothing else, this is a guide of how to proportion your curriculum for the online graduate market, as the previous slide did so for the undergraduate online market. Moving on to the particular degrees. The undergraduate degree program, here's where we gave you the 2012 data. By the way, I know Learning House has the 2012 report and the 2013 report up on its website. It's on our website as well. But these are the degree programs at the undergraduate level. So looking inside those general categories, of course you'd find, if you added up all the business administration, accounting going down, business finance going down, I think that does it. Of course, it's the dominant field. Then the information technology, which I said were in the STEM fields, and then criminal justice and law enforcement, which we put down in the social sciences. But this is even a finer map of what you should be offering to appeal to the market. And there's not very much change from one year to the next. I don't think I see very much change. I think the next slide should get us into the graduate degrees, and the same rationale, the same logic. Not too much difference from year to year, and you can't offer enough business. That doesn't mean you shouldn't get into the STEM topics or the social sciences and so on and so forth. But you probably can't maintain a program with some degree of a business thrust.
We have a question from the audience.
Yes. What is STEM? Science, technology, engineering, and math.
Great, thank you. But the question we have is, looking at the increase in employment within 12 months of completing online programs, isn't it to be expected that the data would indicate that many people get new jobs, seeing that a huge percentage of those involved are younger than 24, so at the beginning of their career? In other words, how do we demonstrate that the data are not simply reflecting the life stage of the students rather than the effect of the online program?
This is Dave. That's a good point. I mean, about 25% of these students were traditional college-age students, so there's still a big percentage, especially the graduate students, that are older. And it would be expected that a person who is fresh out of high school or 2 years out of high school and going to college for the first time, they're going to be out there trying to get that job. So that it's factored into these numbers. It's a good point to draw attention to. It's still impressive when you look at the students, that the number of people that switch jobs or got a promotion or things like that, though, that in a sense it just reiterates the fact that going to college is a good idea. It pays off for you.
Right, and I think all the national data is pointing that way as well.
Yeah. I want to make a comment, Carol, about this slide and the previous slide that breaks down the field of study into finer areas.
Right.
And it sounds a little bit like a broken record when you think about business, but many of the fields, when we list like humanities or STEM fields or so forth, are broken down into really distinct fields within those broad categories. So is business, but still business administration, that one degree, that one field of study, is so dominant here, 20% of the graduate students. And when you look at just a little ways down the list, you see how small these numbers get. So nursing at 2.1%, human resources, again, a subdivision of business. And the point I want to make is that the business is really more dominant than that pie chart shows, because many of those fields are broken into distinct subfields that don't have near the numbers in the enrollment that business by itself does. So it's the biggest field when you look at the broad categories, but when you look at individual majors or individual disciplines, it really stands out 5, 6, 7 times bigger than most other programs. So it reiterates the point that that's the dominant major as well as the dominant field of study.
We have another question that's actually related, which is, of the business management grad degrees, what's the relative interest in business versus management?
I have no idea.
No, we lump those together. Business administration, management, we keep them as one phrase because many programs list it one way or the other and they don't distinguish. If you go down the list here, though, you'll see accounting is obviously a separate field. Business information systems is a separate field. Human resources shows up here as a separate field. But the difference between management and administration is not reflected here because many programs make those interchangeable.
Right. Okay. Dave?
Yeah, so we wanted, obviously MOOCs are the hot topic nowadays, and we wanted to get a feel for if these students were aware of MOOCs and what they thought about them. So we asked the question, and again, you had to fall into one of these categories. This isn't kind of multiple choice. It wasn't surprising to me that most of these people had, a third of them hadn't even heard of them, a third had kind of heard of them, but didn't bother to pay much attention to them or do anything with them. But the surprising numbers also more surprising, those bottom three numbers, these are people that have actually engaged in a MOOC. About 15% of these people had either enrolled in one and dropped out, or they were still enrolled, or they had enrolled at some time in the past. So MOOCs are a relatively new phenomenon, as we all know, and this is a population that's predisposed towards online learning. They're already enrolled in a fully online program, but a significant number, 15%, had actually been into a MOOC and enrolled in one and at least tried it for some time. So there's obvious interest here. Again, how you deal with that, there's not a clear-cut line of vision, I think, in terms of what do you do about MOOCs. If you're the planner or the leader of an institution, do you offer them? Do you accept them for credit? Do you find a way to offer credit for somebody else's MOOC? That's still a pretty murky territory at this point. And it's interesting, we continue to see and hear announcements that venture capitalists are investing money in these MOOC companies, but nobody really knows, in my estimation, where they're going to go. But we'll continue to track student awareness, student participation, and interest in MOOCs, so you have that information to consider as you think about your online programs and how you fit MOOCs into them or don't. Yeah, so let's move on to kind of basic question here. What sector are these students coming from? And the dominant area here is the public institutions. Publics have 45% of this particular market, so to speak, where the privates are fairly small. I'm surprised at the amount that's still in the for-profit sector. As I said earlier in my opening remarks, the for-profit sector is shrinking. They're losing students, and I think it's going to start catching up and reflected in our numbers in the next year or so, that the orange piece of the pie is going to be shrinking and the other sides will get bigger. But almost half of these students are enrolled in public institutions.
One point about this is a very dramatic chart. And the fact that so many of you probably don't realize, and I know we have a lot of for-profit participants in this audience, but a third of the share is probably, I think we're predicting in the next few years that that's going to go up down to about 30% of share. But these for-profit institutions are very, very agile. They created this market, over 10 or 15 years ago. And so we're waiting for their next best response to regain market share. And I think the publics and the privates have to be, noticing what they're going to be offering in the near future to regain what they once had a larger share of.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Carol. I think to put this in perspective too, it's a little under 10%, maybe 9% of the total college population attends a for-profit. So you can see how much the for-profits dominate the online space. They have 35% of that space and only maybe 9 or 10% of the whole college student population. So they were leaders. They're still a major factor in this environment, and they are outsized in terms of their participation or their number of students in the online side of their programs. And it'll be interesting to see how they respond to challenges that are out there now as competition becomes tighter across the board. The next slide emphasizes something that we said last year, and we've mentioned it a time or two already in this presentation. We'll continue to focus on, and that's the location or the proximity to a campus. Now, it's not just the campus, but this could be an instructional center or site. So main campus, branch campus, instructional sites were part of this question. If a student resides within 50 miles or within 100 miles, they're represented here. And the numbers are a little bit smaller this year than last year, but bulk of these students, a strong majority, 70% range, are attending an institution within 100 miles of where they live, or a center for one of these institutions. So the power of a known quantity, of having a name being in the newspapers regularly, of having a campus that people drive by or a center where names on a physical building is a powerful tool. And if you think about it, it makes sense because it's a known quantity. And again, when there's choices out there, when there's now you can't go more than 50 miles until you run across an institution that offers online programs, you start to see how the market breaks down into these smaller circles. And as you plan to develop your strategy for online programs, you think about what's your territory where you're a known entity, where the student, where you have name recognition, where you have visibility, where you have alumni that are concentrated in the area. Those are all tremendous advantages that you capitalize on because of your physical space when you go into the virtual space.
And I think there's a psychological factor here. It's just the idea that if you need them, they are not that far away. And if you have to show up with a transcript problem, or you want to argue about your bill, or you need to see a faculty member for something, they are accessible. But the other thing is, if you study with a regional institution, your employers will know the institution. There will be other alumni in the area. You can say the name and people will recognize it. So there's a lot of momentum toward taking an institution closer than farther away.
I just saw some recent data. A question was asked a group of public institutions about whether they do national or international marketing. And I was surprised that 10% of these institutions said they were developing international marketing plans, and I think it was close to 30% that were building national marketing plans. And I just can't imagine that those will pay off for that many institutions to try to get that broad a reach. But time will tell, and we'll see how that plays out. Let's go on to this next set of slides. Tell a story about why these students pick the institution they do. It's a critical set of data here as you plan your programs, and not just the program offerings, but the services around those programs and how you position the institution. So similar to last year's survey, the number one answer on the board is reputation. Students want a reputation of an institution that they can be proud of. They say, I attended there. So that's a key factor in their decision to choose. And in a minute, we're going to talk about some of the features that go into reputation, because that was a drill down question. But moving up this year in the survey, the second response was no set class meeting times. These students, again, want flexibility, and you want to be careful if you start requiring attendance either on campus or face-to-face events or even an online activity. There's a structured time that's going to be a barrier to many of these students. However, Carol made the point earlier, these students are not all cut from the same cloth. They have different interests, backgrounds, different ages, and so forth. So it's illustrated here. If you drop down, I think the third from the bottom response, it says that, again, a pretty highly rated factor was that there are class sessions with set times providing facilitated group interaction. So a lot of these students don't want any set times, and that's a barrier for them, but there's a significant group that also want a set class time when they can interact with other students and with their faculty members. So you're going to see this over and over. There's not a clear-cut one-size-fits-all response for these students. Another example of this is if you go down, the bottom factor on this particular slide, they want faculty members that hold a full-time doctorate in their field of study. But in the second page we're going to show you in a minute, there's another question about faculty that have practitioner experience in the field, don't have a terminal degree necessarily, tenure track kind of faculty, but these are practicing people that teach part-time on the side, and that's highly rated as well. So if you're the planner here, you're getting mixed messages. Do I focus on full-time faculty with their terminal degrees, or do I focus on part-time faculty with real-world experience? Well, again, there's no correct answer here. You want to be able to honor both of those, just as well as some students want to have a set time when they can interact with other students and faculty members. Some of them don't want that. You have to be able to be flexible here and kind of think about a variety of students when you're planning your program and the activities in it. One thing I want to mention too on the previous slide was one of the higher factors is credit, that you get transfer credit liberally applied, that you don't have to repeat courses and take extra credits to graduate, but that the institution is offering generous transfer credit policies as well as credit for other kinds of activities. We'll get to that in a minute. So wanted to kind of highlight some of these points. There's a lot of information on this slide to go in to read on your leisure. Also, we noted in the asterisk here which of these factors were also highly rated in the top 10 in last year's survey. So you get to kind of see where there's repeat activity. It adds some weight to this particular set of data. So the follow-on slide and the next one, we drilled down on this question about reputation. Reputation is the #1 factor. Here's the breakdown when we ask them, well, what makes up reputation for you? And it seems like it's a no-brainer, but it's kind of surprising that the fact that it was accredited was such a big issue when these students responded. We tend to overlook that, I think, because people that work in higher ed understand that almost every institution is accredited. It's not eligible for Title IV unless it is either nationally or regionally accredited. But there's still an obvious message here to send to students. And I think a fine way to slice that is not just that you're regionally accredited or you're a fully accredited institution, but many, many institutions have programmatic accreditation in particular disciplines or fields. So that's another point that you can emphasize, especially if you're a business person. You want to emphasize that your business program is accredited, if it is, by one of the professional bodies. Quality of faculty was a critical factor, obviously, and this is a good question for us to follow up on next year, because what they mean by quality of faculty, I'm not sure, but it does give you an opportunity as the program leader to kind of define that. If you want to emphasize that you've got credentialed faculty members or a lot of practitioners and that they have real-world experience, those are elements that you can bring forward here, because students are obviously paying attention to who the faculty members are.
I think there's
Go ahead, girl.
I was just going to point out, what interests me is the #4 ranked. It has a campus, which kind of relates back to the earlier data about, you know, studying with an institution closer than farther away. There's something about a setting, there's something about a location, there's something about, you know, something being tangible that does impress these people. So that's why so many of our for-profit institutions have set up campuses, so that they would have either a service center or a place where students can come in and get assistance in any way they want. I also want to point out those bottom two, that whether you're private doesn't matter too much as whether you're a for-profit. Those two pretty much rank the same way, except public comes up a little bit higher at the 12% rank. So these people have probably had a lot more exposure to the public and know it better than the privates and the for-profits, I would suspect.
Mm-hmm.
We have a question about any comment on the 4% rating for alumni network, yet look at the University of Phoenix recent campaign and the volume of money it spends on marketing. Is this an incongruency in approach? This is for factors for choosing an institution.
That's the previous slide you're referring to?
Yes.
The alumni, accomplishment as an alumni, 15%. Yeah, because a lot of those ads deal with where you can end up when you study at the University of Phoenix. What these data would say is that they want to see, I mean, it might be better than the accomplishments of the alumni would be who's teaching the courses. And #3, people who attended and recommended. So people who can offer testimonials, which we have known in our other market studies is an incredibly good way to reach the marketplace, and that is testimonials not only from recent graduates but also from the employer market.
Wendy, let's move on in the interest of time. I want to make sure we don't run over.
Oh my God, yeah, sorry. Okay.
We're in good
I think there's a question about this. I was surprised at these data. The academic credit based on portfolio assessment, remember the old Kale approach, and outside experience. And actually close to 40% of the people said they did have, at the institution where they attended for online education, received credit based on portfolio or outside experience. So if you're not doing it, it sounds like something you should be thinking of. And I remember this from the, the earlier days of adult education and the portfolio assessment route that Kale promoted for many, many years and is still doing.
And you remember excuse me, Carol,
Go ahead.
the slide earlier in the presentation, Carol made the point that 70% of these students bring credit with them. And here it shows that 39% are bringing experiential credit of that group. They don't bring a lot of credit. I mean, the typical student brings, I think, less than 15. It's 1 to 15. Most of these students don't have a lot of experiential credit, but it is a factor, it is a route, and it's an easy way to help these students move forward.
Yeah, I think it's about 30, maybe the median, 30 credits, which is, 10 courses to them, or they divide by 4. Okay, the next slide on the greatest advantages, I think it is, of online study. I think this makes sense to most of you. When and where I want, it's a have it your way generation, that's for sure. And I think these all just make a heck of a lot of sense. They want convenience and time, and guess what? The 19-year-old, the 21-year-old, and the 23-year-old want to study where and when they want, and they want the flexibility because, how many students are working at the younger age full-time or part-time? They want to study around their work obligations and their families. They may marry earlier than once. And so, this individualization is paramount here when you look at these the order of the advantage. So anyone who's marketing to this population, guess what you would say loud and clear. Moving on to the next slide. The shorter the better. How many times have I said that over the last 20 years? When you ask them about how long they'd like to take a course, you say 14, 16 weeks, forget it. If you say 10 to 12, well, that's a yawn. If you say 8 to 10, their eyes light up, and if you probably say 6 to 8, that's better. But here, I think the median falls something around 30, 40, around 8 to 9 weeks. So you know what my preference is whenever it comes to this kind of a question? It's called 8 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks. If you're offering 14 to 16-week courses, you can forget it. The shorter, the better. It's not that they want less in instruction, they just want compression and intensity. If you can do it in 16 weeks, could you please do it in 8? I'll study longer, I'll stay online longer, but let's get it over with. I want to see the light at the end of the tunnel. This is what that is saying. That's what this chart is saying. On the next one, we have to move a little bit faster here. Consideration, we said to them, did you consider a hybrid program or a classroom-based program? And you all know hybrid is where some of the courses are offered online and some of the courses are offered in the classroom, which requires you to come to campus. Or did you ever consider a classroom program? And 23% did consider hybrid programs, and only 15% considered classroom programs, and both and 18% considered both. The message here is you really aren't taking enrollments away from your classroom courses. Most of these people, when they consider online, they want online. When they want online, they're not ready to go to a classroom. And if they're not ready to go to hybrid, the fact is they want online because they can avoid the classroom, and they can avoid the trips, and they can avoid the campus. So, for all of you worry that if you start, there's some of you out there who limit the age of people who can attend an online program like we used to do years ago with evening and weekend. Oh my gosh, you have to be 23 or 24 or older so that we don't take students away from our day programs. I don't think that's true here. I think you just gain enrollments rather than transfer enrollments.
Yeah, this next slide reiterates that point pretty well. It's a similar kind of question, but would you have likely studied on campus if an online program wasn't available? And a significant group of students here, almost 40%, a little over 40%, basically say, no, I wouldn't do it. If it's not available online, I'm not going. So it makes this same point that you're not going to cannibalize your on-ground programs by offering online. You're going to pick up a whole new segment of students that aren't coming anyway.
Right, absolutely true.
So just let's move on, Wendy. Yeah. So this is interesting that it just iterates the point or emphasizes the point that these students make a decision fairly quickly. That 51% of them decided with less than 3 months. They picked an institution, they were going to attend, and they got enrolled in it. So they don't waste a lot of time investigating and studying. Once they're looking for a college, they decide pretty quickly. So it just emphasizes how if you're an institution serving this population, you got to be responsive as well because they're quick decision makers.
Yeah, and what it means is you got to have a ready and willing and able and time-conscious follow-up staff, because if you don't respond to them quickly and efficiently, they'll just move on to another institution.
Mm-hmm. And the final slide, Carol?
Yep. Want me to do this one? I love this one.
Yep.
Because remember that slide the first one where we had 45% of students in American colleges having taken at least one online course? We're breeding a new generation of online education because those who have taken it tend to move on to fully online programs. If you look at this chart, more than half have engaged in online at the time we spoke to them about their current online study. So they like what they got and they want more. So we're breeding. What says to me is that we're breeding in college now with all. I can't imagine anyone online right now who is not offering an online college at an online course at one of these hundreds of colleges we have with us today. And if you are, what you're doing is breeding a whole new population of fully online students. I think this chart makes that clear.
Building our own. So that concludes our formal presentation for today. We covered a lot of ground here in quite a bit of time. As Carol said, we have the full study available on either one of our websites, and there's more data there and more detailed explanation. But we've covered the main ideas, the main themes here, and some of the important findings. We appreciate the work that you all do in online education. And as I started out by saying, it's a huge opportunity for people in America to get an education, and we're building the capacity and the operational efficiency to be able to do that. So we wish you well in your endeavors. Carol and I will stay around for a half hour here. If some of you want to continue longer and pursue some questions or other topics, we're happy to engage either with text-based questions, or we can do some verbal questions, I think.
We have some questions in the queue, Dave.
Okay, let's fire away.
All right. Ruth Newberry has a question. I'm actually going to let her talk. So Ruth, okay. I'm unmuting you, and you can go ahead and talk whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Here at my institution, we have been deeply involved in trying to meet the requirements for credit hour equivalencies, instructional equivalencies for online programs. And what we're finding, to compress these courses that might be 3 hours into 8, 9, 10 weeks is really upping the amount of time a student has to devote to that course. So we're a little concerned about student success given that what's required to compress, to meet the accreditor's requirements.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I empathize with you. In fact, I'm happy that you're focusing on this issue, because in my experience, I work with a lot of institutions that do online programs, and they don't pay enough attention to this particular issue. If you do the credit hour equivalency in terms of hours in class and equate that, these students, these courses need to be substantial courses, and if you're going to try to verify how much time they spend so that it's equivalent to an hour face-to-face time and 2 hours outside of study time, it's a fair amount of work. So it emphasizes that you need to have rigor in your program. You know, the other way that many institutions are addressing this issue is through equivalency of their online courses with their face-to-face campus-based courses. And if they have similar learning outcomes and similar assessments, you can make a strong case that it's the same course. It's covering the same content, the same material. In fact, we host our conference, we call it the Connect Conference once a year. It was just a couple weeks ago in Louisville. And I did a presentation there with one of our partner institutions, Barry University in Florida. And Barry's we've worked with Barry to do a study now over several years. So they have the exact same assignments and the exact same assessments and the rubrics to grade those in the face-to-face classes and the online classes. And we're getting data that says there's no difference in performance when you hold that constant. So you can use that if you're at the point where you can get good assessment data, you can use that instead of the time measure, which I think is very appropriate.
Right. I think another answer to that is that, you know, we compress courses all the time in the summer. We have 6 weeks, we have 7 weeks, we have 8-week courses. Many colleges offer courses in January or May on a 4-week basis. And I think if you look at the online providers in comparable institutions to yours, you might see how they have done this.
Well, we have been doing that, and even with those, you know, like Jan terms and yes, all the summer terms, there still are assumptions that you're squeezing, you know, the amount of work, not necessarily the individual tasks. You find other ways to get at the assessment, to get at the performance, and much of this. But at the same time, when you are dealing with online, what you have to figure in that you don't figure in the face-to-face courses much is the dealing with the technology. The way in which an assignment or the instructional material now has to be viewed, reviewed, etc. And there's time there that we don't always account for.
Yeah.
And students, so we're looking at competencies, we're comparing, you know, they are already the same face-to-face as they are online, but you need to change some of the activities. Otherwise, class participation starts to become death by discussion board.
Yeah, you need to get some variety in there, because, or make some big reading assignments or something like that. Yeah.
So
well, I want to emphasize it's the point that you make. You go back to that slide that we showed about the preferred term length, and the shorter the better. Carol makes that point very strongly. But if you compress a regular, normal 16-week or 15-week semester into an 8-week term and cut that in half, then you double the amount of time that the student should spend in that class, either in homework or in classwork. And when you do the math pretty close, that gets to be a pretty good sized number of weekly work that an online student needs to spend. And if they're taking 2 online classes, it also emphasizes the point that these students need to be almost full-time students, because
well, you know, that's a good point. Because in our market analyses around the country, what we've seen is, we didn't ask the question here, and we probably should next year. The ideal schedule for an online learner is back-to-back 8-week terms 6 times a year. That gives you 48 hours, because then they can enter or re-enter or stop or start, and there's no like beginning in the fall or spring. And that's ideal because they want to get it over with. I mean, there's no reason why they can't study online in the summer or in January or in May. But a September through May schedule is just 2 times a year on a semester basis, is just stretching it out. So they love that efficiency of back-to-back courses, you know, 6 to 8 weeks.
Yes, we've been very successful with that, and I totally agree, and I really appreciate your answering this question. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay, we have a few more questions. Amber asks, in regards to admissions decisions, should institutions stray away from traditional admissions policies in regards to distance education master's programs? For example, many institutions require a student to apply in March, April for the fall semester.
What's the question?
I know. The question is, Carol, let me rephrase her. I think I got this right. That traditionally, when you enroll in grad school, they start once a year, maybe twice a year, and there's a big lead time. To enroll in the fall semester, you need to submit your materials because there's many steps in the process, faculty reviews and so forth.
Right.
So it's deadly if you stretch it out. I mean, online students aren't planning that far ahead, or they don't want to take that much time, or they don't want to wait that long before they start their program. Once they decide to go, they want to get a program and get going. So the bigger problem here is not so long the admission process takes, I think, and that's a problem, but it's also the number of starts that you have. So as the person just said, they run 8-week terms, they run 6 terms a year, so you have 6 starting points. So even if you have a long, kind of torturous process to go through to apply and be reviewed, if you have 6 starts a year, you're doing that 6 times, that gives the student windows to get through it. But I would clearly advise shortening the admissions process as much as possible, making sure it's student-friendly, not faculty member-friendly. So try to make it as tight as you can. But the big thing is to give them more times to start so they don't have to wait once they've decided.
Like the earlier table we showed you on that 3 months is when they begin searching and when they want to enroll. I think that's good to document the quick turnaround.
Yeah, if your process takes longer than 3 months, that's a good, kind of a good guide. If your process, application review process takes longer than 3 months, from start to finish, when the student first makes the contact to when they can sit in a class, you're probably too long, and you're not going to be very attractive to this kind of student.
Exactly.
That actually is a great segue into another question, which is when do students want to start, summer, fall, or spring?
all of the above. I would say all of the above, but there is still a thrust after those summer months. Now, you know, that's a good question for next year. Now that I think about it, I don't think we've asked these people when they began their program. Yeah, and but it's a chicken and egg problem, because with the person we just heard from, if they only start, you know, fall and spring, then that's all the individual has the option of doing, or unless they're looking for those that are starting. So it's probably a preference question. So I don't think I have the data for that answer.
Yeah, historically, the biggest enrollment starts, the biggest start dates are always the beginning of the fall term. That's your major start. People are still psychologically, I think, focused on that. Plus, they have kids and so forth, and they're on the public school schedules as much too.
And that's why your advertising budget booms in the summer months.
Right.
Somebody asked, how do you define the IT disciplines, IT versus computer information systems, et cetera?
Ooh.
I have to go back to our coders for that. I don't have that data available to me right now.
I think they're referring to the slide where we, not just the broad fields of study, but the individual majors. And
yeah, and I don't have those at my fingertips.
Yeah, I think the answer is that we leave that up to the student. We list them and then the student picks. So we're not making that definition. We're listing commonly accepted or commonly offered degrees, and the students pick which ones that they're enrolled in. So we don't define them very tightly in that regard, but leave it up to them.
Does anybody else have any questions? Okay, well, thank you everybody for joining us. I want to invite you to join us for our next webinar, Strategies for Online Program Selection, which is going to be Wednesday, September 25th at 2 o'clock Eastern Time. Thank you for joining us. And somebody else has a question. Heather, you are on the line.
And all I wanted to say was thank you. It was absolutely super. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. That's a good note to end on, Heather. Thanks.
Exactly. Thank you, everybody, for joining us.